Hi. All right. Let's talk about fall products. What do we have here at Elevate this fall? Trends?
Well, fall is kind of like our Super Bowl at Elevate Agronomics. It's kind of our
Wow,
time
that's
to shine.
a strong
It's
statement.
well, we live in western South Dakota, and winter wheat, fall planted crops, different things with cattle. It's a pretty big time in a lot of our customers' operations, and it's one of, if it's not the busiest, it competes really closely with April and May timeframe for planting and for different things going on.
Interesting. So what kind of products are people planting this fall, this area? I feel like we're
Right.
also podcasting. I kind of like this. I could use this as double play here.
I know.
Okay. Continue on.
So winter wheat is obviously the poster child of fall here. So we'll start there. And winter wheat's something we're pretty proud of. We know a lot about. We process and clean a lot of winter wheat and produce a lot of winter wheat ourselves. So it's a crop that we're pretty passionate about. Kind of our shining star, I guess, in our lineup would be one coming out of Westbred. So Westbred is we call it private label wheat. So it comes from the private sector versus the public sector. Like SDSU, which is still probably the most varieties we have, comes out of the public sector. But Westbred 4422 came to us a couple years ago. They had another good variety we really liked, and this one came and beat it pretty handily. It's just one that kind of, it checks all the boxes. It's not an overly tall wheat. It's a wheat that if managed correctly, it holds its protein extremely well. It's really hard to compete with from a yield standpoint, and that's why it kind of leads our pack. Um, Definitely the highest yielding. Did I say the variety yet? Westbred 4422? I think
You
I
did,
did.
but it's
Okay, all
okay.
right.
Good
All right.
branding.
Yep. So yeah, Westbred 4422. Medium maturity, not a super early, not a super late. So it really kind of checks all the boxes. If you want to start early, you can start with it. If it's something you're pushing till, late October, I'm still not afraid of using it. One that likes to get up and go in the fall if we, God willing, we get a little bit of moisture. Um, Fairly easy thrashing wheat, so it just, like I said, it just kind of checks all the boxes. Its downside is it's a couple bucks more expensive, so it's on the higher end of the price, but we feel the payoff matches where that's at.
That's what I was
Uh,
going to ask. Any watch outs, but you
yeah,
kind of just said
yeah, and
that.
that's kind of, I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect wheat, um, but it's one that I think is as close to it as what we have. Um, that followed up closely with one coming out of SDSU called Winter, oddly enough, or ironically enough. Winter's been around for a few years. It's tried, it's true, it's proven. It's definitely one. There again, it's not a perfect wheat, but from a yield standpoint, it's really hard to beat. It can get a little bit taller, so it's one that, if somebody's really pushing nitrogen, if you happen to put it under a pivot, things like that, it can get some height to it. It does handle our drought stressed areas, a little harsher environment. It holds it pretty well. Straw strength probably isn't its best attribute. It's one that doesn't lodge or go down under the right nitrogen circumstances. If you're a livestock operation with a heavy manure program, or somebody who really likes to push the coals on nitrogen to try to push protein, this one kind of correlates that with larger plant, taller growth, things like that, and that can kind of lead to some straw strength issues. So it's just one, if we manage correctly, I think it just does really well for us. There again, from a grain yield standpoint, it ranks right up there towards the top, and it's been around for quite a few years. Um, Another one that we've really liked. It's been around for a few years. It came into our lineup last year, kind of as a primary piece, is one called Wolverine, SY Wolverine. That too comes out of the private sector from a different company, but it's just one that really likes our Western environment. It's really hardy. One that if you do push nitrogen, if you do push irrigation, if you do push management, this is one that I think is for you because it holds its height down. It's not one that will get overly tall. Thresh is a little bit harder, and any of the SY wheats I think have that attribute about them, that they're a little harder to thresh, but they compensate it well with yield. It's one that doesn't have probably as much natural tolerance to diseases as some of these other ones that we like to see. So it's one that we definitely want to see a seed treatment put on one that we definitely want to see a fungicide put on, if not two fungicides put on, to reach its maximum potential. But it is one that can handle a pretty tough environment. That's what we really like. That's kind of our big three that we really like to hit.
For Wolverine, my notes say that it has very good wheat streak mosaic virus tolerance. What is that? This is probably a question of someone that has no idea about wheat, but what is that? Does it matter around here?
It does, but it's rare, thankfully, because wheat streak mosaic, if you get it in, it's actually incorporated into the plant through, and now you caught me off guard. I can't think of the insect that inoculates or gets that disease into the plant. So if you have that insect, it's usually followed by that disease. Like I said, it's very rare, but if you have it, it gets very detrimental. Like it takes yields down to almost zero. So it's one that about any wheat that comes into the market in this area has to have pretty good tolerance against. But it's one that holds that well. It's just some of the other leaf blights and other things that Wolverine is a little more susceptible to. But that's me being pretty tough on it. I mean, it still fits our environment very well.
Okay, so far you've said that 4422, Winter, and Wolverine are the three top go-tos. What else do you have available?
Yep. So some of the other ones, the ones I would say fit the tried and true, proven, never let us down type wheats are Ideal and Redfield. They're going to be household names for people in western South Dakota. They've been around for a long time. We really like Ideal, especially as we push west. As we get more into that higher elevation, drier climate, as we get to the west, it seems like Ideal just holds itself together really, really well. Been out for quite a few years.
Ideal?
It's the Ideal wheat,
but,
yes. Yep.
Right.
It's one that's probably in its final phases of its life. Just because there's a lot of new wheats coming out, a lot of new varieties coming out of SDSU's breeding program that I think are going to be as good or better, and just kind of the natural occurrence of varieties and genetics. We're going to start replacing those, but Ideal still plays a key part in our climate out here, like I said, especially as they push west. Redfield's another one that one large wheat grower told me one time the best yield he's ever had is with Redfield. And ironically enough, named after the town of Redfield. That's how all of these wheats are named, Winter, Ideal. It's all South Dakota towns. But it has a red look to it. So literally your fields will be red. It kind of has that bronze, that red tint to it. So you know when you're in a field of Redfield where it's at. Another one that's probably reaching the end of its life, especially with other ones coming out like Andes, because they're a little bit longer maturity, Redfield would be. So ones like Andes we'll talk about a little bit, Midland we'll talk about a little bit. So I think Redfield's probably kind of on its last lap and on its way out, but it's one that we still kept in production just because it's just a never let you down type of wheat.
Right.
And then some of the newer ones, Andes is one that we've had out for a couple of years from a threshing standpoint, from a standability standpoint. It checks all the boxes. It might not hit the home run and yield like some of these other ones will, but it's one that, especially under high management, it does really well. If it's something you're having an issue of combining it, if it's something that, if you're a grower that likes to save your own seed and you want a good clean sample, if you're going into maybe a market with milling that you need a good clean sample and good milling characteristics, Andes does that for you. And then the two kind of new ones coming out of SDSU that we have our eyes on are called Midland and Pheasant. Midland we're going to put into production for seed production this fall and start to introduce that one kind of as our Ideal replacement, potentially even a Winter replacement. It too has kind of the red chaff look, the Redfield look to it, but we just really likes the looks of it, especially if you're going into a market like organically for milling, where milling quality plays pretty high. Midland has really good milling characteristics with it, and it's been noted by the folks that test for that SDSU sends that off to get tested. So really like Midland. Pheasant's another one that the jury's still out on for us out west. SDSU trials, it looks pretty good, but as you bring it further west, it might not be the home run hitter that maybe we were expecting it to be coming out, but it's still really new. There's still a lot of testing done. Testing results will be released here shortly from SDSU, from their plot results to see that. So that's one we're definitely keeping our eye on as a potential go forward with as we move forward into new genetics. The other thing in winter wheat is herbicide tolerance. So if you're in a position where you have rye that's gotten out of hand and you can't control rye, but you want to keep your small grains into the rotation. If you have jointed goat grass, which is not an every year occasion, but we do see it from time to time that we need to make sure we clear it up. We have a couple options, cheatgrass, other things. So we have a couple options for herbicide tolerance. One from the coaxium family or the coaxium system. That comes from AgriPro called AP24X. That one really caught our eye from last year's SCSU yield trials. Typically, when you put herbicide resistance into wheat, you lose yield potential. It's a yield drag. And AP24X did not appear to have a yield drag because it not only was it one of the highest yielding ones, but it also brought with it chemical tolerance. The coaxium system is a really good chemical system for effectiveness. It's just challenging because you have a small window to apply it effectively. So it's a challenge, but if you get it done right, it's a really good proven system for weed control, grass weed control in your small grains. The other one is new for us this year from the West Spread lineup called 4445, and that's a clear field too. So it's a double gene clear field tolerance, kind of the newer, latest genetics, latest trait from the Clearfield system. A little bigger window of application, maybe not as good on and goat grass, and it's still pretty good on rye, but coaxium might be a little more effective if applied right, but Clearfield gives you a little more options. This one too caught our eye because we did a yield trial with one of our growers this year, and that one won that yield trial. It was a top from a yield standpoint, and it brought with it Clearfield 2 tolerance. So that was the first year we've seen that. We're going to have that one available. Fortunately, we don't need the herbicide tolerance as much. It's another thing that just adds more cost to your seed. So if you don't need it for sure, we don't recommend it. But if you want that peace of mind knowing that if you need to clean up some grass weeds in your wheat, we have those available.
So where does the majority of the winter wheat go from this area? Like where does it go? Does it go to mill? So I guess see some of the notes here talks about milling and baking quality, like pheasant. That's one of the points there. Does much of our wheat go to that, or where does it head to once it's out of the field here in our area?
Yeah. So I mean, majority of it all in situations where you have high protein, low quality wheat, it'll go into the feed sector. Everything else will go into baking and milling. Hard red is not as intricate flour as maybe some of our soft varieties or some of our spring wheat varieties and other things. So just pretty common traditional flour making is what a majority of our wheat would go into kind of throughout the U.S. So nothing very locally. It all gets either moved well out of here or exported, but it all goes for the most part into the baking sector.
All right. So which one's your favorite of all of the grain winter wheat options that we carry here at Elevate?
I did them in my order, I guess is what I would say.
Okay.
I still, if someone comes into me and said, I don't know what wheat I want to plant, what's the best wheat out there? I tell them 4422. If the price is a little more of a hindrance to them, just because you have to pay a little more of a royalty coming out of the private sector, winter's still our first one. It's had its share of issues with standability, but it's still really hard to top. So I see 4422, winter, and Wolverine is kind of my top three. But if you don't want to you don't want wheat that lets you down, Ideal and Redfield are right there to match it.
All right. What about forage wheat?
Yeah, so fall planted forage has become more and more popular in this area. Obviously, western South Dakota, south central South Dakota, we have a lot of livestock on feed. So just going to give us a couple things. One, if we get the right fall with the right rainfall, we're going to have planted early September, mid-September. We're going to have some grazing opportunities on that wheat for this fall. But it's the ability for us to get in the field now while we're not as busy as we are in the spring. We don't have the weather challenges now like we would have in March and April. We want a spring planted forage, cool season forage. So we're able to get that forage in to grow next spring, to harvest, to bale, to chop, what have you in the spring, and then be able to double crop that with another feed source after it. Rye has typically been the leader in that space. Rye is still something that we sell. Rye is a challenging plant. We love a lot of things about rye. It's got a big, robust root system. It's extremely hardy as far as getting through winter, as far as growing in dry conditions. We joke it's kind of a weed. I mean, it grows wherever you put it. The problem is it is like weed that it sticks around for a while after it. So if you're in a winter wheat growing scenario, your operation plants a lot of winter wheat. When rye gets mixed with winter wheat, it screws up its milling quality and milling ability, because wheat and rye are two different animals and are treated differently. And it's something that we can't get mixed together, and we don't want rye in our wheat. So if you're a cattle operation that just needs a lot of feed and a lot of feed right away in the spring and a lot of grazing this fall, rye stuff to beat. The other thing, it has the ability to kind of put a toxin into the soil as it's growing in the spring to withhold weeds back. So it's a natural weed suppressant. It's one our neighbors further to the east, so we get into the I-states, the climates that have a lot more consistent rainfall. It does two things. It helps dry the ground out in the spring, because they have the issue of wet fields that we don't run into, and then it naturally suppresses weeds. So it does two really good things. Our problem is when you get in this arid climate in the spring, if you don't get it taken care of right away, it can either go to head and put seed, or it sucks up moisture like crazy. So it's a challenging one, but super low cost, really good feed. It matures early in the spring, so you get in there, get it, take it off, plant another crop behind it, and provide some really good cover into the fall. So not as prevalent, because now we finally have two other options that don't interfere with our winter wheat rotations, and that's forage wheat and triticale. So from a quality and a tonnage and a longer maturity standpoint, longer window to harvest, triticale is still the king. Tons out extremely well, super high quality, pretty winter hardy, maybe not as winter hardy as winter wheat and rye, but it still can withstand our winters pretty good.
And triticale isn't it like
Cross.
rye? Okay, it's rye
Yep.
and wheat cross.
Yep.
Okay.
Rye and wheat cross.
Yep.
Is how triticale was born. So,
Okay.
but it's one, if you want really good high quality grazing and you get a really good fall with good rainfall and cool weather, that one's phenomenal to graze. Your cows really love it. But the one we really like and started using a lot more of is one called MTF 1435. So that's a hard red wheat. It's awnless, because that's the problem with winter wheat, is it has the big prickly awns on the head, and that can cause some issues if you hay that and feed it to your cattle. So it's awnless. It grows extremely tall. We've had it get over 4 feet tall before. Puts up a lot of high quality feed, really good filler feed. Puts up a lot of bales. Another one you can graze in the fall, but it's one that if things go wrong, if the weather isn't right, if you have plenty of hay, you can combine it and sell it just like regular winter wheat, because it's a hard red winter wheat. So that's what we really like it. So if you happen to have some volunteer come up next year, and if you go wheat on wheat and you have some volunteer of your forage, it's a hard red winter wheat, and it's not going to interfere with harvesting or grain quality or anything like that. So that's kind of and it's kind of the middle point from a pricing standpoint. Triticale is the most expensive, rye is the cheapest, forage wheat's kind of right in between. So it gives us a lot of options. You give it maybe a little bit of quality, maybe a little bit of tons, but that's iffy with triticale, and maybe don't have quite the winter hardiness or the weed suppression like rye, but it really fits our rotations really well. The other thing we're starting to look at, if you're doing winter forages for grazing, if you're doing winter forages for soil health and cover, mixing some sort of cover crops in with them. If we get it planted early, so it could start in August, early September, mid-September, if you're planting in that window, we can put things in like turnips and radishes yet. Maybe not get as big a growth as if we planted them in July, but you're still going to get some soil health benefits. You're still going to get some versatility and diversity into your mix, some better grazing for your cattle in the fall, something that's going to die off in the winter and not come up in the spring. But it still gives you a little bit of mixture to put in the fall to kind of hit a few pieces as you're producing a crop for spring forage. There are some, if you're not focused on grazing, but you're focused on soil health, there's some winter cover crops, I guess, or cover crops that have the ability to overwinter. So hairy vetch is one of those. That's a nitrogen fixing legume type plant. Winter camelina. So we put those in for soil health benefits, not necessarily for its grazing benefits, but it's something that's going to come back up in the spring and still kind of give you the soil health benefits in the spring as well. And then it's not going to hurt your hay bale or your hay sample to have that in there. It's just not probably going to add a ton to it. So a couple different kind of unique options. That's kind of a new thought process for us here of mixing cover crops in with our winter planted forages, but one that kind of hits a lot of pieces for us from a soil health and grazing perspective.
Have you seen some producers here locally do more of that?
Yep, and probably within the last couple of years, we really started to see more of that mixing with your winter forage. Because typically, once you get into that mid-August time frame, your mind kind of starts to switch of, I lost out on my full ability to get the benefits from cover crops. So I'm just going to move on to something else. Well, now we're starting to think, hey, we can start mixing some of these cover crops, incorporating it back in with our winter forages. Not getting as much benefit, but we're still getting some benefit from it.
Yep. Okay.
So, and I would say turnips and radishes are probably the most common, low cost. We know what they are. We know what they do. We had a few people try some of the hairy vetch stuff last year, but super dry fall led to, they have the ability to overwinter, but they're not as winter hardy. So just not a lot came up in the spring. So it is a tougher task for us in western South Dakota to get that to work, but we get all the right pieces, just like every other cover crop. Everything works right. You can have a lot of benefit from it.
Perfect. Anything else on the seed side before we talk about, I think seed treatment is an important piece of
that's
this
kind
as
of our
well.
that's kind of our big ones for winter planting, winter forages.
Okay. So then, the seed treatment side, as people make their decisions for what they're going to plant this fall, what do you suggest as far as seed treatment?
Yep. So the one thing about when you're planting stuff in the fall is it's going to be in the ground for a very long time. If it gets super dry like we've gotten in the past few falls, that seed's going to sit there a long time. We really want to protect it from a seedling disease standpoint. A majority of our wheat that goes out that's non-organic is treated with a fungicide for sure. Super low cost. For what you get back in protection, it's a pretty easy decision to make in our mind of putting some sort of fungicide protection on it. While we're putting that fungicide on it, that's an excellent opportunity if you want to try to push for bigger yields, for a bigger root system to grow more organic matter, for doing other things. We can add things to that seed treatment. So one of those would be a PGR. Kickstand PGR is one we've used for a couple years and really like the looks of it. We really notice it in the fall. It's another one that's not super high cost. It's not going to add a lot from a per acre standpoint. But if we get a decent amount of moisture in the fall, you can definitely see that extra added growth, that extra root system in the fall. It's going to help it overwinter a little bit better, give it a better start right away in the spring, and hopefully do to a higher yield after that. So that's kind of our 1-2 punch is fungicide and a PGR. We can add a insecticide too to give us some, and I want to emphasize that, some protection against grasshoppers. So you get the wireworm protection. That's pretty easy. It doesn't take much insecticide to do that. We don't deal with aphids like our friends to the south do as much. But if we get that insecticide on the treatment and that plant wants to grow in the fall, that insecticide is going to grow in the plant and give some resistance to a grasshopper wanting to eat it off. Luckily for us in the fall, there comes a time when grasshoppers start to kind of get through their life cycle and the pressure goes down. But it is a concern if we get a high level of grasshoppers. You got a wheat plant that's not very tall, you get a lot of grasshoppers come through there and eat that plant off, and that could be pretty detrimental. But if that grasshopper's pretty good size, there ain't enough seed treatment in the shed to prevent against that. So the smaller grasshoppers, you're still going to get some protection, but it's not going to be full protection on it.
You're going to need a lot of protection right now because the grasshoppers are bad.
A lot of grasshoppers.
Yeah.
But
okay.
but when we see the most fear, it's early on, and I've looked at grasshoppers for the last 3 months. I know they're bad. They're eating my corn. They're eating my soybeans, and then it's just like all at once the grasshoppers disappear. So it's not as big of a concern as maybe what it feels like at times, but we can put some insecticide on it. Again, the nice part about wheat treatments is they're not very high cost, so it will give you some level of protection against that. And then you get the wireworm protection that we do have some of here that kind of gives you a little more peace of mind.
Perfect. All right, so then moving over into the crop protection side, as we move into fall, what does that look like?
So the one from a weed standpoint, from a weed barrier starting to build a weed barrier, there's no better time in the fall to start building that weed barrier for your crops the next year. If you want flexibility in what you plant the following year, fall applied Valor, without question, we would recommend it. gives you, as soon as that ground is warm enough in the spring, as soon as weeds want to start to grow, we're not always out there with the sprayer right away. It's a little tougher to get some of that stuff sprayed in the spring timely, where if we can apply it in the fall, we have to wait for the soil to cool down because we don't want that chemical to activate quite yet. So we got to have the soil 50 degrees and cooler and stay there before we apply it. So it's a late fall application, but we come through with fall applied Valor, gives us that head start in the spring and helps kochia, pigweeds, things like that are a nuisance for us here. That gives us a pretty clean, fresh start. And typically we we follow it up with a spring pre-emerge, and the likelihood of having to come in after that crop is growing is greatly diminished if we have kind of that weed barrier protection on. If you know you're going to go to corn, if you know you're going to go to sorghum, without question, and you don't want to spend as much money, but you want a weed barrier, you can still fall apply atrazine. So atrazine is still on the table as a weed barrier. Put a little bit on now, put a little bit on in the spring, and then plant your corn crop after that. So you still do have time. That one too needs to wait for that soil to cool down, but it gives us a pretty good opportunity to start that weed barrier. The other one, if we're doing that in the fall, especially if we have, God willing, we have a good corn crop, some of our wheat stubbles, some of our other kind of higher residue crops, if we want to start that breakdown process, Mother Nature eventually will start that breakdown process. But if we want to speed it up and want to get that residue broken down and get the nutrients that are in that residue broken down and into the soil, fall is a great time to put down a biological. The one we really like is called Meltdown. So you put that down. We just have to have at least 3 days consecutively of 50 degrees or higher. So we need a little bit of temperature to get those bugs to start to colonize on that stalk and to start the process and kind of grow. Then they can start the breakdown process. They can overwinter, and then be there in the spring to help that residues really start to just crumble up, break down, get them nutrients pulled out of the residue and into the soil a little bit faster than what Mother Nature does. So that's one we really like. We were going to do a lot more of it last year, but as we know, 2024 fall was extremely hot, extremely dry, and this is something that needs moisture to get activated. So if your stalks are wet, so if you follow it up, if you take wet corn and that stalk still has a lot of moisture in it, that's enough moisture to get these bugs to activate and colonize. Or if we do get a little bit of fall moisture and we have a little more wetter environment to go into that our residue sitting in, Meltdown without question would be a really good option to get that residue broke down, especially in a no-till situation like so many of us are in. Makes plantability a lot easier, and then the nutrient benefits come along with it.
So you mentioned, hoping that we have a really good corn crop at the end of this year, seeing what that looks like. So let's just talk about that right now, because I know you've been out looking at some fields and walking around with some people here recently, and we've caught a few rains in areas that maybe needed a little bit. So what's your update from South Central South Dakota?
Yep, and I think this will come as no surprise to anybody that grows crops around here. This is probably one of the drier spots in the Midwest, right here around the town of Winter. You go a little ways north, you definitely go south and west. It's been a pocket that has missed a lot of rains, but the one resounding comment I hear time and time again as I go out and look at fields is, we shouldn't look this good. So I think that's a testament to how our crops are raised. I think it's a testament to no-till and rotation systems, having wheat stubble to plant our crops into, to hold what little moisture we get, good fertility, good weed management. All that leads up to a really resilient, drought-hardy crop. Yes, genetics have come a long ways in corn. That 20 years ago, our corn genetics couldn't handle drought like they do today. But that paired with the farming practices of this area and to be able to be resilient against drought really showed up this year. We've been a lot drier, but it's been a pretty tough go for a lot of folks. There's still some pockets that have missed even these last kind of later key rains. But overall, I don't think we're going to hit any yield records in this part of the state, but I think we're going to be, a lot of places should be above average. There's a lot of really good looking corn. The soybeans, honestly, a stressed out in July soybean that follows it with rain in August like we've gotten so far. There's still a lot of August to go, and we need to keep the heat at a minimum. But I think we had the moisture and the ability for that soybean plant that was held down in size because of the stress it went through in June and July. A stressed plant wants to produce more pods. It wants to branch out more. So the potential in soybeans, I still think, is there to have a really good soybean crop. We just have to keep falling with a couple more rains, and we have to keep heat to a minimum. We get a hot, dry September like we had the last couple of years, our beans are still going to suffer, but there's a lot of potential on the table. A lot of this corn, after its slow start because of May and kind of behind all year, it seemed like it pushed the pedal, and it's really caught up. So I think we're going to start to see silage harvest, wet corn harvest a lot sooner than maybe what we think. But I still feel that there's a lot of potential for above average corn and soybean yields around, which is fun to see given the tough June and July that a lot of us went through.
I know that it's been peak harvest, the last month-ish too. Have
Yeah.
any updates there of how that actually turned out? I haven't
Yep.
heard anything, I guess.
Yep, small grains was tough this year for us. For one key reason, it was a hot, dry June, and a hot, dry June in small grains is never good. A lot of test weight issues, a lot of yield issues, so led to some higher protein wheat, but some lower test weight wheat, some lower yielding wheat. That one too kind of surprised us though. I mean, there was quite a few areas that they held their test weights 58, 59, pushing 60. They held 40, 50 bushel wheat pretty close. I mean, there was some decent small grain. It seemed like the spring grains held on a little bit more. The winter, fall planted grains from last year, they had a tough start from the go. Super dry last fall. Never really grew any until this spring. So kind of the spring grains that were planted kind of caught up and surpassed a lot of our winter planted stuff. So spring wheat held together pretty decent. Oats held together pretty decent, but it's just a pretty mediocre to average small grains harvest for us this year, which was unfortunate because last year was a record-breaking small grains harvest for us. So it was a little tougher to take, especially with given the commodity markets. But as hot and as dry as we were in June, it was no surprise to see some test weight issues, some quality issues, and ultimately some yield issues.
Makes sense. All right, so you talked a little bit about too. Obviously, we have a lot of cattle, a lot of livestock here in our area, and that's another product area that we offer here at Elevate.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like for fall as far as livestock products?
Yep. So we're still using predominantly our summer blend minerals. That's a blend that we helped develop with our friends at J&R, both in a tub and a loose mineral. So it gives us first and foremost a chelated, fortified mineral source, really high quality. We feel high quality, low salt mineral source. It gives us garlic to help as a piece of fly prevention, not the only thing, but it helps with our fly prevention. And then another product that we refer to, the common name is heat, but it's one that helps cattle regulate their body temperature. So we're not out of the woods yet in terms of hot days and summer days, and so we're still using that summer blend as we kind of dwindle down into fall and using that. And then as we transition into fall, especially we get into weaning time, and this is pretty key, especially as high priced as these calves are. Every pound we lose is a lot more dollars lost than what it has been in the past. So when we go to weaning time, that's the most stressful time in a calf's life, is when you pull it away from its mother. It's not used to eating out of a bunk. It's not used to not being around its mother and seeing its mother, and so a lot of bawling, a lot of things like that for a few days. We want to make sure we manage stress or keep stress at a minimum. Really easy to do with stress tubs. So the stress tubs we have, they're in a smaller tub, so you can take more tubs and spread them out, so you have more ability for the calves to find that tub and to lick on that tub, and kind of give them that stress relief in that mineral. To be able to kind of get that in them and help get over that stressful time. And then the other thing is kind of help jumpstart them eating at the bunk. So it kind of it's got to go somewhere to get something. It starts to lick it, it starts to like it, and then it starts to look for more things like it, and then it finds a feed bunk. So we really recommend the second you wean your calves, have those tubs in your pen and ready for your calves to start finding. The other thing we can add to one of those tubs is a product called Respire. And the best way I've explained Respire, it's kind of like Vicks Vapor Rub for your calves. So when if you get down and you smell this tub, you can inhale it. It's got an expectorant in it, like Vicks Vapor Rub does. So as that calf is licking on it, it's inhaling that stuff and getting it into its system. So especially if we're dealing with high dust, high heat, things like that, where we start to worry about dust and ammonia and other things, starting to get that in it and trying to get out ahead of snotty noses and other things without having to medicate after it. So throwing out a stress tub with Respire in it is a pretty easy thing in our eyes to do to help your calves get through that stressful time and get eating in the feedlot.
Do they offer that for kids that just went back to school and are a little nervous? Like that's another separation from their parents, kind of calm them down and then make them feel better because they're going into a high high stress environment that has
Yep.
a lot of sickness too. I mean, we could use some of this. Anything they could do
Yeah.
there?
I think that's where you wave goodbye, you roll the window up, and you pull out of the parking lot. I
That
think
sounds
is
like
yep,
the
the
way you
easiest thing.
handle it.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then the other thing, as we look at, so we talked about our calves and our weaning of our calves. Now we're starting to transition our cows. They're coming off of summer grass. There's not a lot of grass left in our pastures, so we don't have a lot of quality left in our grass. And so now we're going to look to additional sources, places to put our cattle to try to get them as far into the winter as we can before we start feeding them. So things like corn stalks, things like milo and sorghum stalks, maybe these cover crops that got planted and we're lucky enough to catch a little rain and get started and going. We definitely want to have some additional added protein sources in front of these cows. The easiest and most effective way to do that is a protein lick tub. It's putting a high protein, ours are 30%, but putting a high protein source lick tub out with your cows. They're eating maybe a high fiber, high forage diet, but maybe not a high protein diet. This kind of balances the scales and gives them something to live off of. And like I said, as we get them further and further into winter, before we start feeding them some higher quality alfalfa grass types things, this we feel is kind of a must to get in front of our cattle with protein. After that, then we start transitioning into calving season. So now we're looking way ahead, but we want to get prepared for it. And that's where we start looking at our omega breeder tubs and pellets from FormaFeed. So high levels of vitamins. You got your omega fatty acids. Um, in terms of the pellets, we're going to have some ability for feed breakdown and other things in those. So that's something we're kind of looking forward to. We're not into omega breeder season yet, but it's something that's coming down the road as we kind of look ahead into next year's calving season.
Awesome. Well, any other products or anything that people should think about as they head into fall?
I think those are the big ones. I mean, obviously we know what the commodity environment's like. We know what our moisture situation's like here in the southern part of the state. Um, a lot of tough decisions to be made of where do we put our dollars into what crops as we look. Next year starts now, and that's kind of the neat thing about as we look into fall applied or fall planted crops. We're kind of starting the 2026 crop growing season right now. So we still feel wheat is a must-have in our rotations here, and we're seeing that this year in a dry year. Any crops, soybeans, corn, cane, what have you, that's planted on wheat stubble can be that much more resilient to drought. So we still know, even though the economics maybe aren't there on wheat, the long-term play, the long-term soil health, the benefits for our subsequent crops after that, still I think warrant wheat in our rotation and wheat to be planted. The beauty about small grains, it's a low cost when compared to corn or compared to soybeans. So I think it's a good economic manager as well as a soil manager as well. So that's why wheat plays such a big part in our business. Wheat plays such a big part in a lot of our customers' operations because this area is made for it, and it really, I think, pays off dividends if we keep that in the rotation. And then as we look to especially things like fall applied chemicals, if we can reduce the amount of times we have to spray next spring, that's that many more dollars we're not having to put out to raise a crop. So it's just little things that we're near the end of the year. We spent money all year long. The commodity prices aren't as good. Maybe our harvest wasn't as abundant as it has been in the past, but we're just trying to put some pieces in place to keep your costs low going forward for next year. And fall is a great time to do that. God willing, we get a little bit of rain, and it makes all these decisions a lot easier.
Absolutely. So, if someone wants to learn about all of these products in more detail, where would you send them?
I would, if I was you, I would go to elevateagronomics.com. Hard to say word, but that's where you're going to find all this information. We have a lovely marketing department that's really good at what they do, and put together all the things we talked about into a product guide. So it's kind of your quick hitters if you just want to kind of learn, kind of help to start making those decisions on your own. That's a great place to start. It's brief, it's concise, but it gets to the point of all the products we talked about today as we look at fall and what to do with our ground in the fall. Or stop in and call us, because this is something we'd love to talk about is wheat and forage crops, fall forage crops, things that we can do right now to help us get jump started next spring.
Yeah, and so I guess I didn't really talk about this much or ask you about this when we talk about the seed treatment side. So if someone makes a decision, that they want to plant wheat and they want that treated, Is there a process there, a timeline? Just making sure that, a lot of times these decisions are made today. Like, I need it yesterday, or I
Yeah.
need it today, like later today. But I think that could be a holdup potentially, correct, when it comes to some of that treatment situation.
Uh, Potentially, and it used to be more than what it is now. With the investments we made in seed treatment and our seed treatment facilities, a lot of that's turned into a pretty quick turnaround, a pretty fast process. So it shouldn't hold things up. The one thing we'd really like is just start having these conversations now, starting to get plans in place. We try to forecast, we try to foresee what people want to do, but we know this year these decisions are going to be a lot more difficult than maybe other years have been. So it's something we don't want to just have bins full of winter wheat sitting here and then we got to look at them all winter. So it's something we're going to manage our inventory a little bit to not get overstocked. So we really want to start talking early to make sure we have the wheat in place to be prepared for when the planter's ready to go, when the field's ready to go. We don't want to be the one holding you up. So as long as we kind of know at least what you're thinking, what varieties you're thinking, to make sure we're scheduled. We're sitting really good on inventory right now. We feel really comfortable where we're at. But it's something that when it goes, it can go fast, especially the bigger acreages that we have out here that a semi-load doesn't go as far in winter wheat as it would in soybeans or corn or things like that. So it can go quick, so we just want to start having those conversations now. And then as far as the seed treatment decision, that can be something made on the spot right now. If you're not sure about it right now, but we get to loading your truck and yep, I want to treat it, it's a flip of a switch and away you go. So our treating system is extremely efficient, it's extremely fast, and also it treats extremely accurately, and that's what we really like about it. So you're going to get a well-treated seed in a short amount of time, on demand, and we're ready to go when you are.
Awesome. All right. Great. Well, anything else when it comes to this fall?
That's it. Pray for rain and plant winter wheat. That's what we do.
And go Huskers and Jackrabbits.
And jackrabbits.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.